surrender. As for the stimulus of want, in the first place, no man in our community knows the goad of poverty; and secondly, if he did, almost every occupation would be more lucrative than writing. Our public libraries contain all the books of the past which time has preserved. Those books, for the reasons above stated, are infinitely better than any can write nowadays, and they are open to all to read without cost. We are not such fools as to pay for reading inferior books, when we can read superior books for nothing. With us, novelty has an attraction, and a new book, if bad, is read when an old book, though good, is neglected. Novelty, to barbarous states of society struggling in despair for something better, has no doubt an attraction, denied to us, who see nothing to gain in novelties. But after all, it is observed by one of our great authors 4,000 years ago, that he who studies old books will always find in them something new, and he who reads new books will always find in them something old. But to return to the question you have raised, there being then amongst us no stimulus to painstaking labour, whether in desire of fame or in pressure of want, such as have the poetic temperament no doubt vent it in song, as you say the bird sings; but for lack of elaborate culture it fails of an audience, and, failing of an audience, dies out of itself amidst the ordinary avocations of life. But how is it that these discouragements to the cultivation of literature do not operate against that of science? Your question amazes me. The motive to science is the love of truth apart from all consideration of fame, and the science with us too is devoted almost solely to practical uses, essential to our social conversation and the comforts of our daily life. No fame is asked by the inventor, and none is given to him. He enjoys an occupation congenial to his tastes, and needing no wear and tear of the passions. Man must have exercise for his mind as well as body, and continuous exercise rather than violent is best for both. Our most ingenious cultivators of science are, as a general rule, the longest lived and the most free from disease. Painting is an amusement to many, but the art is not what it was in former times, when the great painters in our various communities vied with each other for the prize of a golden crown, which gave them a social rank equal to that of the kings under whom they lived. You will thus doubtless have observed in our archaeological department how superior in point of art the pictures were several thousand years ago. Perhaps it is because music is, in reality, more allied to science than it is to poetry, that of all the pleasurable arts, music is that which flourishes the most amongst us. Still, even in music, the absence of stimulus in praise or fame has served to prevent any great superiority of one individual over another; and we rather excel in choral music, with the aid of our vast mechanical instruments in which we make great use of the agency of water, than in single performers. Note. This may remind the student of Nero's invention of a musical machine by which water was made to perform the part of an orchestra, and on which he was employed when the conspiracy against him broke out. We have had scarcely any original composer for some ages. Our favourite airs are very ancient in substance, but have admitted many complicated variations by inferior, though ingenious, musicians. Are there no political societies among the Ana which are animated by those passions, subjected to those crimes, and admitting those disparities in condition, in intellect, and in morality which the state of your tribe, or indeed of the vril-ya generally, has left behind in its progress to perfection? If so, among such societies perhaps poetry and her sister arts still continue to be honoured and to improve. There are such societies in remote regions, but we do not admit them within the pale of civilized communities. We scarcely even give them the name of Ana, and certainly not that of vril-ya. They are savages, living chiefly in that low stage of being, Koom-Posh, tending necessarily to its own hideous dissolution in Glek-Nas. Their wretched existence is passed in perpetual contest and perpetual change. When they do not fight with their neighbours, they fight among themselves. They are divided into sections, which abuse, plunder, and sometimes murder each other, and on the most frivolous points of difference than would be unintelligible to us if we had not read history, and seen that we too have passed through the same early state of ignorance and barbarism. Any trifle is sufficient to set them together by the ears. They pretend to be all equals, and the more they have struggled to be so, by removing old distinctions, and starting afresh, the more glaring and intolerable the disparity becomes, because nothing in hereditary affections and associations is left to soften the one naked distinction between the many who have nothing and the few who have much. Of course the many hate the few, but without the few they could not live. The many are always assailing the few. Sometimes they exterminate the few, but as soon as they have done so, a new few starts out of the many, and is harder to deal with than the old few. For where societies are large, and competition to have something is the predominant fever, there must be always many losers and few gainers. In short, they are savages groping their way in the dark towards some gleam of light, and would demand our commiseration for their infirmities, if, like all savages, they did not provoke their own destruction by their arrogance and cruelty. Can you imagine that creatures of this kind, armed only with such miserable weapons as you may see in our Museum of Antiquities, clumsy iron tubes charged with saltpetre, have more than once threatened with destruction a tribe of the vril-ya which dwells nearest to them, because they say they have 30 millions of population, and that tribe may have 50,000, if the latter do not accept their notions of soksek (money getting) on some trading principles which they have the impudence to call a law of civilization. But 30 millions of population are formidable odds against 50,000. My host stared at me astonished. "Stranger," said he, "you could not have heard me say that this threatened tribe belongs to the vril-ya, and it only waits for these savages to declare war in order to commission some half a dozen small children to sweep away their whole population." At these words I felt a thrill of horror, recognizing much more affinity with the savages than I did with the vril-ya, and remembering all I had said in praise of the glorious American institutions which Aph Lin stigmatized as Koom-Posh. Recovering my self possession, I asked if there were modes of transit by which I could safely visit this temerarious and remote people. "You can travel with safety by vril agency either along the ground or amid the air, throughout all the range of the communities with which we are allied and akin. But I cannot vouch for your safety in barbarous nations governed by different laws from ours. Nations, indeed, so benighted that there are among them large numbers who actually